This episode is brought to you by Skillshare.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Dannphan's advice video. Last week, you might remember I talked about good criticism, bad criticism, and what exactly I think makes a good critic. Now I want to talk about your role as a writer or creator and accepting criticism, learning how to deal with it, learning how to grow from it. Now there's this idea of humans connecting to inanimate things as though it's an extension of themselves, like when you hold a pencil, you think you're writing it, but really you're using a tool to write it. I'm sure that you've heard this analysis before. The same can be said about things that we create. We don't see it as an inanimate object, we see it as part of ourselves that we've expressed. So when a lot of us hear criticism, we can interpret that to be a personal attack, as though they're not necessarily criticizing the work and how it can be improved, but rather they're criticizing us as a person. And because of that, a lot of us can be emotionally hurt from criticism and hearing negative feedback from something that we may have put our heart and soul into. But I have talked about it again and again, how important criticism is for us to perfect our art, better reach our audience, and just become better in general. Nobody creates a perfect first draft. We have to hammer it out, polish it up, and make it pretty. And in order to do that, we need to hear what other people think. Talent is not something biological that you find within yourself. You create talent with the help of other people. Now, there's two sources of criticism that most people will get, and they're both very different. They have different feelings, different environments, and the way that we deal with them can be different. First, I want to talk about one-on-one criticism. Now, a lot of you who have taken writing classes probably already know what one-on-one criticism is like. Basically, you take a draft of your work, you give it to someone to read, and you talk to them one-on-one to discuss what they liked, what they didn't like, how it can be improved on, and ask questions about certain things that maybe you feel insecure of about the draft. And then hopefully when you make the second draft, it's a lot better. A lot of writers who are working on something will give the draft of their work to multiple people to get different opinions on how it can be improved on. Now, like I've said in my other videos, every single person that you go to for criticism are going to have their own different take on what they just read, their own personal opinions. And I don't think that opinions should be necessarily scoffed at, because how we feel about anything is based on opinions, our own personalities, and how we click with things. If you can't handle the opinions of your friends who are reading your draft as a favor to you, you're not going to be able to handle the opinions of the whole entire world after you've published your work. Now, one of the problems with one-on-one criticism is not everyone you're going to give your work to is going to be a good critic in response. They're not always going to have good advice to give you. They're not always going to really explain what's wrong with something. All they know is that there's something wrong with it. Sometimes their notes are confusing, but that's also why it's important to have a discussion with them and see if you can draw your own conclusions. In most cases with one-on-one discussions, you should be taking your own notes, because even if they're not verbally able to explain why they felt a certain way about your first draft, you can try to interpret their criticisms for yourself and experiment to see if you can change something that will make them like it. Also, being one-on-one gives you the option to ask questions and dive deeper into their critique. If you have an idea right on the spot, you can ask them, hey, if I changed this, would this be better? And they can answer you. So definitely be sure to ask questions. A lot of people who you're going to be handing out drafts to, they're not really going to know what you want from them. There's a certain amount of pressure that you put on for people who are told to critique your first draft. So if they don't have a lot of notes written down, it's pretty important that you start asking questions so that you can start pulling notes from them, and like I said, be taking your own notes based on what they say. Now, I think one of the biggest problems about just handing out first drafts to friends is this idea that somebody who's your friend, who knows that you may be offended by what they say, might be a little bit too scared to give you a proper critique. There are a lot of friends that you give first drafts to who will avoid talking about mistakes that you've made, or will give you a false impression that the mistakes aren't a very big deal. It's important to find honest people to hand a draft to so that you won't get bad criticism back. So if you are handing a draft out to friends, which I'm not against, but if you are handing them out, make sure that you know that this friend is going to give you only honest feedback. If someone is lying to let you down gently, then that may be good for your feels, but that's not going to be good for your work. It's not going to help you improve at all. I think it's important to be open-minded and be willing to change things when you hand someone your first draft. Never be completely married to your first draft. You should be willing to change almost anything. Obviously, if you have an idea of the outline of the story, you can keep the outline mostly the same rather than just writing a new story entirely, but you should be willing to change a lot on the first draft. That's why they call it a first draft, is because it's not gonna be anything like the final version. I write my first drafts extremely quickly because the idea is just to get out a general idea of what the story is going to be like. It usually takes multiple drafts till I get to a final product, and you should expect it to take multiple drafts for you to get to a final product. Even if you're not giving people your first draft, even if you hold on to it and wait till the second draft to let people view it, you should still be expecting to go through even more changes after people have criticized it. If you're not open or willing to change, then you're not willing to any criticism ever. And that's not to say that you have to change everything that the critic tells you to change. They're telling you to change things based on their own personal opinions. And if they're giving you a good criticism, they'll explain why they want you to change things. You need to take into account why they want you to change things, what's the problem with it, and then decide for yourself how you want to fix it, or if a scene they don't like is something that you still want to keep. Maybe this will appeal to the audience that you're aiming for, even if it's not appealing to this particular critic. After all, every single piece of media has a certain audience that it aims for. And obviously, if you're writing a romantic comedy, it might not appeal to people who are die-hard horror fans. So always take that into account. It doesn't mean that their criticism is invalid, it just means that their own biases are going to lean towards wanting something in your story that maybe you don't want in your story. Maybe they want you to go a different direction than you actually want to go with it. Now, obviously, this whole time I've been talking about drafts, because really, if you've waited to publish something to get criticism from people, you did the whole thing wrong. You should always get criticism right away, right when you're starting out just the drafts. But if we want to talk about criticism after you've already published something and after it's already out there for everyone to view, you might have this really negative feeling that oh man, I published something that nobody likes. It's too late to change it. I've only set a bad name for myself by putting that work out there. That can be a really hard feeling to overcome, but I think it's important to also recognize that it's not really too late per se. Yeah, it might be too late to fix something that's already published. That's done. But if you know what's wrong with your past works, you can move on to create better future works. As long as you keep at it and you keep learning, you will get better. And I think that's something important to know. A lot of people don't have a lot of confidence in themselves. Once they mess up this one story, they're gonna mess up all their other stories. Nobody likes me, nobody likes my books. I understand the feeling, but you gotta overcome that. Which all leads me into my next topic of discussion, which is online criticism, which is very, very different from one-on-one criticisms. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to our sponsor at Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. They've got classes for writing, for publishing, comics, manga, animation, everything that you can think of. I've personally been enjoying a lot of manga classes that they have on there. It's interesting to learn about about the different types of styles and the whole process. And if you're interested in that type of stuff, I would recommend checking out Olga Rogalski's videos. You don't have to worry about ads like you do on YouTube. They're always launching premium classes, and it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. All in all, that's pretty affordable considering that you're getting some classes from professionals who actually know what they're doing. And right now, the first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare's premium membership. Now, I'm not saying you should fight to the death, but you're definitely going to want to click on that link before someone steals your spot. So give it a try, take a class, and learn something new, guys. Ah, the internet, the cesspool of life. So naturally, when you publish anything online, you're going to be expecting some criticism and feedback in return. And I do think it's a lot harder to be taking criticism and feedback online versus in person. Part of it is because there's going to be a lot more people who look at your content, and it creates this much more intense feeling of pressure knowing that all of these people are staring at your work and judging it. But even more so, there's this anonymous nature to the internet that can cause us to be a little bit paranoid. There's a lot of things online that you can't pick up from as well as talking to someone in person. If someone is, typing out a critique on your work in the comments section and, they give you this whole detailed critique, your interpretation of that is entirely in your head. You don't know the tone of voice that this person is using. You don't know if they're trying to be fresh with you. You don't know if they're glaring at you or rolling their eyes. And so it's just kind of left up for your own imagination on how this person is emotionally reacting to your work. And in a lot of cases, because of that feeling of being anonymous online, a lot of people will be more harsh to what they're critiquing. And you should also understand that if you're going on YouTube and you're looking at reviews, a lot of reviewers are trying to kind of overdo it. Like even we're trying to play it up so that we can actually make the video more entertaining itself. But it's understandable that the creator of the work can see that video, that review, these people making jokes, and take it as a personal attack. I think it's good to try to get in the habit of being more optimistic, and that's not something that a lot of people are very good at these days. But the idea is to take a positive from a negative comment. Like if someone says, oh, this art is shit in this comic, I hate it, I will never read another comic like this again. That's like depressing to hear when you're getting the feedback, but you can also use that to make something better next time, such as choosing a different artist. But of course, that's just an example. You do also know, everyone knows, that there are some people who are going to be screeching into the abyss, not trying to offer criticism to help you per se, but rather actually trying to personally attack you in order to get a response, more commonly known as internet trolls. The whole point of internet trolls is that they're just trying to get you to fight with them. And a lot of people have this state of mind like, oh man, when someone bullies you, you gotta stand up to them. So therefore you have to respond. No, you don't. You actually don't. You don't have to respond to any of them. In fact, you probably shouldn't. If someone is harassing you, trying to get a response out of you, just so that you can fight with them online, it sounds more like their own personal issues that they should solve. You can just block them. You don't have to deal with that. That's their own little problem right there. And when you're getting all this feedback, it is difficult to distinguish what are just trolls and what are actual valid criticisms that you should be looking at, because in the moment when you're really stressed out and you're really feeling bad that nobody liked your work, all of that just kind of will blend together. And in most cases, it's good to take time to look away from the feedback, take a breather, and then try to go back and approach it with a more analytical point of view. Usually the rule of thumb is focus on the comments that are criticizing the work itself, ignore the comments that are mocking you personally. It's difficult to do, but hey, I believe in you. Also keep in mind that a lot of people who are giving you feedback, who are giving you criticism, a lot of them are doing so because they care. They care about the work at question and they wish that it could have been better. I criticize a ton of things that I like, and I openly admit that some things that I like have some major problems with them. I still like it. And it's incredibly frustrating whenever I really like a series and then they get to the ending and I don't like the ending. And of course I'll complain about it online and be like, why did they do that? I was so into this series and then they just made a bad decision. Oh my god, I'm getting flashbacks. But the point is that the reason I would complain about that is because I cared so much. Because you created something that I really cared about. But that doesn't mean that you are talentless. You were able to get somebody to care about your work, and that's the first step. The second step will be make sure that you don't write terrible endings. But I'm sure that you also have your own personal opinions, how we personally can get better at taking criticism, growing a thicker skin, and getting that work to perfection. So definitely leave your own advice, comments, questions, concerns in the comments section below. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to like, subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. Till next time, guys. Bye!